The theme for LightNight 2021 is play. And in this episode of VG&M Guided Tours at Home, we'll be looking at some of the theatrical performances and plays that took place in the Lecture Theatre in the Victoria Building. Originally known as the Arts Lecture Theatre and today as the Leggate Lecture Theatre, some of the earliest recordings that we have for the first plays in this space come from 1892. And we can even put a few faces to the names thanks to performance programmes kept in the University Special Collections and Archives. Philip Haywood Hadfield was the first Student Council President in 1892 and undertook a lot of work for performances and plays once the newly constructed Victoria Building had opened at the end of the same year. Fellow student Ramsay Muir stated the following about Hadfield and his involvement in the very early plays.
For 2 years he bore the very heavy burden of the presidency. He was perpetually engaged in inventing new modes of social enterprise and finding men to work them. The smokers have never been since equalled. He brought the operatic stars and the leading men of pantomimes to perform in the Arts Theatre and gave them audiences of 600 and more. He reorganized the soirée and had such a genius and passion for such work, and seriously damaged his medical studies by devotion to it.
At these smoking concerts, the male students would smoke and speak of politics whilst listening to live music. These images show smoking concert posters for the Arts Lecture Theatre, and the image on the right from 1897 strictly prohibits women from attending the concert. However, the female students did participate in other theatrical performances, both on stage and behind the scenes, arranging the soirees and plays. Miss E. Bramley Moore was part of the Female Students' Representative Council from 1894 to 95, around the same time as Philip Haywood Hadfield, and so we have a photograph of her too. Prior to her role on the council, she also took part in the Greek play in 1901 as part of the chorus and as a dancer, and many of the female student council members depicted in this picture played an active part in these productions by playing music like Miss Blackledge and helping behind the scenes like Miss Broadhurst. Nursery rhymes and children's stories were popular themes for the plays, as we can see in these photographs from 1895, showing the Queen of Hearts nursery rhyme that was performed in the Lecture Theatre. The performance was accompanied by an orchestra and would have been very similar to a mime, with dance movements and dramatic gestures used during the play. The performance including accusing wagging fingers, dramatic fainting, and a brutal thrashing with a sceptre, as well as a pretty dance, some of which can be seen in the photographs. Even some of the more serious and grave professors were caught laughing as they peeped in to watch rehearsals after their lectures had ended. Another student that we know performed in some of the very early plays was Charles Barkler, better known for being awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1917 for his work on X-rays. He was also a student at University College Liverpool, and as well as receiving his first-class honour degree in physics in 1898, he also found time to perform as part of the chorus in the annual soirée play. On the 17th of December 1902, a morality play called Everymans Education was performed in the Arts Lecture Theatre. Ramsay Muir was a former student at Liverpool during the 1890s and was now Lecturer of History, and he provided the prologue and epilogue to the play. The performance brought together characters who represented the Victoria universities, including Leeds, Manchester and Liverpool. At the time, Liverpool was only a university college, but this play suggests that Liverpool wanted to break free and have its own charter and become a university, as this passage from the script shows. But as it is with these upon my wrists, I have to go where Manchester insists. I have to journey at the beck of Leeds. Give me the freedom which my merit pleads. Give me a charter or a king's decree. Make me, in short, a university. and I will shine a light for all the land.
In January 1903, the student magazine praised the topical play and centred on the university question, which was the subject on everybody's lips at the time. It reported that if the writing of this play needed skill and tact, the staging of it demanded great courage and ingenuity, as it contained no action and consisted almost entirely of a series of long speeches in rhymed verse, full of subtle allusions. Although supposed to be a satirical comedy, the play seemed to many of those who read it doomed to failure, and one gentleman having long experience in amateur theatricals, who was asked to stage manage the production, absolutely declined to have anything to do with it. Thankfully, the Old Students' Association took up the challenge instead, including Miss Graveson, who'd been the student treasurer from 1894 to 95, and Ramsay Muir, who'd written for the student magazine and had been the student council president too.
The play was one of the most successful that had been produced in the Arts Theatre, and on the last evening of performances, Ramsay Muir walked onto stage with a large official envelope that he teased the audience with, stating that it contained the news that they had all been waiting for. Part of the annotated and additional epilogue that Muir performed on that last night was written in the back of one of the play scripts that belongs to the Special Collections and Archives. The script said the following:
Today the deputation we have sent, knowing no cause or just impediment, why Liverpool should not at her sweet will shake from her wrists the gyves that bind her still. This packet, let us hope, contains the news that we, unfettered, our own lot may choose, alone, unhampered, independent, free, henceforth a chartered university.
The following day, the news was confirmed. University College Liverpool would soon become the University of Liverpool, with the right to confer its own degrees, and the ties and chains that had been represented on stage the night before would soon disappear, and Liverpool would be an independent, free, chartered university.
Other large plays that took place in this space were part of the annual student soiree. The students would gather in the evening, and a variety of entertainments were provided in different areas of the Victoria building. One magazine article stated that the spectacle of the Arts Theatre, when it was lit up and filled with people and evening dress, was so fine that you could excuse inattention to the music being performed. And another article in 1898 stated the following:
Your reporter, when the stage manager had his back turned, stole onto the stage and had a peep behind the curtain. The sight was the most magnificent one. Tier after tier rose a mass of lovely dresses and charming faces, and the usually dull tinting of the theatre was transformed into a mass of colouring.
Although the theatre was built to accommodate around 450 people, we know that during the 13th annual soiree in 1897 there was around 800 people in the audience, and it had been far too overcrowded. Because the performances were split into two halves with an interval in between, getting back to your seat was something very difficult for the audience. The following year, in 1898, they attempted to control numbers in the building by limiting the amount of tickets sold to 1,500, and the overcrowding issue was resolved. It's hard to imagine how packed this space once was, as today we can only comfortably accommodate 250 people in this lower section, as the upper balcony is no longer in use.
Packing in an audience to more than double its capacity meant that health and safety, fire exits and comfort were not so much of a priority in the 1890s as they are today.
The lecture theatre stage itself wasn't built specifically for performances, but rather for lectures, and so at times it was difficult for the set designers and performers to work with. A performance in 1908 for Shakespeare's The Tempest had to remove certain scenes for lack of space and difficult staging, And although we don't have many photographs of the performances during these times, illustrations were drawn in the student magazine that give us a sense of what the costumes were like.
The student article stated, "Nothing could exceed the perfect taste displayed in the dresses for the Tempest. Miranda, in her colour scheme of purple and russet, looked fascinating. The magician-like robes of Prospero gave quite a wonderful effect. Ariel's two little dresses were daintiness itself. There was an indescribable charm about the nymphs in their flowing garments, which made one unconsciously think of green fields and woods."
Some of these illustrations also show the staging of some of the earlier Greek performances in the 1900s, and with only a small wooden stage and a large curtain, it is clear why some of the later Shakespearean plays that are usually performed in the round would have been difficult to stage in the Arts Lecture Theatre. Descriptions in the student magazine tell us how the costumes for the Tempest were designed by Mrs. Frances McNair, adapted from Greek vases, and were strictly classical. Between 1889 and 1908, Frances and Herbert McNair lived in Liverpool, where they taught at the University School of Architecture and Applied Design, and we have a few of their paintings in our collection today. They both worked on the student plays, and the School of Applied Art supplied the accessories and scenery for the tableaus, whereby players would stand motionless depicting different scenes and stories from history. And so both staff and students worked hard to put these performances together. One performance that was photographed in the Arts Lecture Theatre in 1908 was called The Cyclops, and was described as a lively comic drama which depicted Ulysses facing Polyphemus the Cyclops. It had also been performed at Otterspool in the pastoral plays a few months earlier, and was then moved indoors to the Victoria Building as it had proved so popular. An extract from the play is as follows.
"Here, Cyclops, if any man asks who blinded thee, say that it was the warrior Ulysses, son of Laertes, dwelling in Ithaca." The Cyclops answered with a groan, "Of a truth the old oracles are fulfilled. For long ago there came to this land one Telemus, a prophet, and dwelt among us even to old age. This man foretold that one Ulysses would rob me of my sight. But I looked for a great man and a strong, who should subdue me by force, and now a weakling has done the deed, having cheated me with wine."
Although the magazine correspondents write that this particular soirée performance was enjoyed and the audience was filled with laughter, it appears that some of the students around this time were getting tired of the soirée as a form of evening entertainment. The soirees provided scientific experiments, music recitals, refreshments and plays. But one reader expressed the following opinion.
"Dear Sir, may I put forward a plea for the abolition of that late Victorian amusement commonly known as the soirée, initiated now some 20 years ago by one whose genius for such organisation was quite extraordinary. It has been perpetuated year after year with heavy dull regularity. It gives a few engineering and art students a short respite from classes. It gives countless others many extra hours of labour to the detriment of their work and the dissipation of their energies. Finally, it confers untold boredom on those whom a sense of duty has taken to their 12th, 14th, 16th, or possibly 18th soirée. We venture to hope that this year's Guild Council will set itself firmly against any attempt to perpetuate this annual function. Held triennially, a soirée might indeed bear good fruit, but held as it is now, annually for nearly 20 years, it has become an effete and worn-out institution that needs regulating to the limbo of things forgotten, to be brought out perhaps at long intervals for occasional refurbishing and exhibition."
This sentiment was also hinted at by Ramsay Muir earlier, as Philip Hayward Hadfield had neglected his medical studies in order to ensure that the plays and soirees were a success. However, One could argue that if a Nobel Prize winner, Charles Barker, was able to get a first-class degree with honours as well as being part of the student soiree plays, that the performances and rehearsals weren't a detriment to all of the students involved. Although the annual Victorian soirees did eventually die out, we do know that the lecture theatre was used for many other plays and performances over the years. They moved away from classical literature and incorporated more modern themes and humour relating to student life. In 1913, a student comedy called The Love Episode of Miss Binks and Mr. Jinks plays out within the walls of the Victoria Building, using both the Tate Library, student common rooms and Arts Lecture Theatre as its setting. And it may have been a real situation that happened between two students, which was then dramatised and made into a performance for the student panto night.
The original story alludes to a shy male student trying to offer to sharpen a female student's pencil in the Tate Library, and then being ridiculed by her friend. Gossip spread around the common room and the poor mortified student could never show his face again. The panto performance, however, is a little bit more exaggerated and suggestive, with character names changed to Miss Minks and Mr. Winks, who find themselves alone in the alcoves of the Tate Library, which were known for romantic dalliances. The play had a much happier ending than in the original story, as the characters fall madly in love.
However, it wasn't just the students that took part in the plays, and as the years passed, the formality between student and lecturer softened, and there was a lot more social interaction. Frank William Wallbank was a Latin lecturer and remembered one performance in February 1939 that both the staff and the students put on in the lecture theatre. The Professor of English Literature entered the theatre dressed as Agamemnon, riding his chariot, which was actually a disguised wagon that had been borrowed from Lime Street Station. The station master received complimentary performance tickets in exchange for the use of the wagon. Wallbank's character was that of an old man who had blackened teeth, while his friend got to play a handsome youth with a suntan. These plays were a fun way for both the students and the professors to bond and to have some light-hearted entertainment after their lectures. From the early 1950s onwards, the annual French play became a university institution, and performances were particularly popular with A-level French studies. The syllabus at the time incorporated French literature, and the productions of A-level texts provided sold-out performances to school parties coming as far away as Birmingham, Yorkshire and Cumbria.
One such performance is depicted in this photograph from 1966 and is a French play by Armand Gatti, produced by Dr. Dorothy Knowles. It tells the story of a trade unionist called Auguste, who throughout the play lies on a hospital bed mortally wounded, recounting his life and creating a future he is never to have. The press reported it was one of the most amazing performances that they had seen in this space, and the audience was spellbound. With a cast of 40, it was complex to watch, but no doubt to stage in such a small space, and props and staging were borrowed from the University Air Squadron and the Everyman Theatre. The University of Liverpool's French Dramatic Society performed in this space until the 1990s.
In the mid-2000s, the space was renovated in preparation for the 2008 opening of the Victoria Gallery and Museum, and the Arts Lecture Theatre was renamed the Leggate Lecture Theatre in commemoration of Jack Leggate, the former Dean of the Medical School. The space has served many different functions, from hosting student and public lectures to music concerts and film screenings, but we've also hosted student and public plays too.
We've had shorter performances for children, such as Rudolph the Sneezing Reindeer, The Dark Room and Peter Rabbit Roadshow. And we've also hosted Shakespearean actor Michael Pennington, who performed excerpts from King Lear in Brooklyn as part of the university's literary festival. The space was also used for filming as part of the BBC's adaptation of City and the City with David Morrissey and Christian Camargo, and so the legacy from the Victorian smoking concerts of inviting stars of stage and screen to our venue continues even to this day.
Many plays and performances have been enacted in our lecture theatre over the past 130 years, with hopefully many more to come. Do you have any memories of the plays in this space? And what performances and plays would you like to see staged here in the future? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.